Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning, we'll be in 2 Samuel, chapter 14, verse 1, through chapter 15, verse 22. Now Joab, son of Zeruiah, realized that the king longed to seize Absalom. So Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman. He told her, "Pretend to be in mourning and put on garments for mourning. Don't anoint yourself with oil. Instead, act like a woman who has been mourning for the dead for some time. Go to the king and speak to him in the following fashion." Then Joab told her what to say. So the Tekoan woman went to the king. She bowed down with her face to the ground in deference to him and said, "Please help me, O king." The king replied to her, "What do you want?" She answered, "I am a widow. My husband is dead. Your servant has 2 sons. When the 2 of them got into a fight in the field, there was no one present that could intervene. One of them struck the other and killed him. Now the entire family has risen up against your servant, saying, 'Turn over the one who struck down his brother, so that we can execute him and avenge the death of his brother whom he killed. In so doing, we will also destroy the heir. They want to extinguish my remaining coal, leaving no one on the face of the earth to carry on the name of my husband.'" Then the king told the woman, "Go to your home. I will give instructions concerning your situation." The Tekoan woman said to the king, "My lord the king, let any blame fall on me and on the house of my father, but let the king and his throne be innocent." The king said, "Bring to me whoever speaks to you, and he won't bother you again." She replied, "In that case, let the king invoke the name of the Lord your God, so that the avenger of blood may not kill. Then they will not destroy my son." He replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, not a single hair of your son's head will fall to the ground." Then the woman said, "Please permit your servant to speak to my lord the king about another matter." He replied, "Tell me." The woman said, "Why have you advised something like this against God's people? When the king speaks in this fashion, he makes himself guilty, for the king has not brought back the one he has banished. Certainly we must die, and are like water spilled on the ground that cannot be gathered up again. But God does not take away life. Instead, he devises ways for the banished to be restored. I have now come to speak with my lord the king about this matter, because the people have made me fearful. But your servant said, 'I will speak to the king. Perhaps the king will do what his female servant asks.' Yes, the king may listen and deliver his female servant from the hand of the man who seeks to remove both me and my son from the inheritance God has given us." So your servant said, "May the word of my lord the king be my security, for my lord the king is like the angel of God when it comes to deciding between right and wrong. May the Lord your God be with you." Then the king replied to the woman, "Don't hide any information from me when I question you." The woman said, "Let my lord the king speak." The king said, "Did Joab put you up to all of this?" The woman answered, "As surely as you live, my lord the king, there is no deviation to the right or to the left from all that my lord the king has said, for your servant Joab gave me instructions. He has put all these words in your servant's mouth. Your servant Joab did this so as to change this situation. But my lord has wisdom like that of the angel of God, and knows everything that is happening in the land." Then the king said to Joab, "All right, I will do this thing. Go and bring back the young man Absalom." Then Joab bowed down with his face toward the ground and thanked the king. Joab said, "Today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord the king, because the king has granted the request of your servant." So Joab got up and went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, "Let him go over to his own house. He may not see my face." So Absalom went over to his own house. He did not see the king's face. Now in all Israel, everyone acknowledged that there was no man as handsome as Absalom. From the sole of his feet to the top of his head, he was perfect in appearance. When he would shave his head, at the end of every year he used to shave his head, for it grew too long, and he would shave it. He used to weigh the hair of his head at 3 pounds, according to the king's weight. Absalom had 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a very attractive woman. Absalom lived in Jerusalem for 2 years without seeing the king's face. Then Absalom sent a message to Joab asking him to send him to the king. But Joab was not willing to come to him, so he sent a second message to him. But he was still not willing to come. So he said to his servants, "Look, Joab has a portion of field adjacent to mine, and he has some barley there. Go and set it on fire." So Absalom's servants set Joab's portion of the field on fire. Then Joab got up and came to Absalom's house. He said to him, "Why did your servants set my portion of the field on fire?" Absalom said to Joab, "Look, I sent a message to you, saying, 'Come here, so that I can send you to the king with this message.' Why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me if I was still there. Let me now see the face of the king. If I am at fault, let him put me to death." So Joab went to the king and informed him. The king summoned Absalom, and he came to the king. Absalom bowed down before the king with his face toward the ground, and the king kissed him. Some time later, Absalom managed to acquire a chariot and horses, as well as 50 men to serve as his royal guard. Now Absalom used to get up early and stand beside the road that led to the city gate. Whenever anyone came by who had a complaint to bring to the king for arbitration, Absalom would call out to him, "What city are you from?" The person would answer, "I, your servant, am from one of the tribes of Israel." Absalom would then say to him, "Look, your claims are legitimate and appropriate, but there's no representative of the king who will listen to you." Absalom would then say, "If only they would make me a judge in the land. Then everyone who had a judicial complaint would come to me, and I would make sure he receives a just settlement." When someone approached to bow before him, Absalom would extend his hand and embrace him and kiss him. Absalom acted this way toward everyone in Israel who came to the king for justice. In this way, Absalom won the loyalty of the citizens of Israel. After 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go and repay my vow that I made to the Lord while I was in Hebron. For I made this vow when I was living in Geshur in Aram. If the Lord really does allow me to return to Jerusalem, I will serve the Lord." The king replied to him, "Go in peace." So Absalom got up and went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent spies through all the tribes of Israel, who said, "When you hear the sound of the horn, you may assume that Absalom rules in Hebron." Now 200 men had gone with Absalom from Jerusalem. Since they were invited, they went naively and were unaware of what Absalom was planning. While he was offering sacrifices, Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's advisor, to come from his city Gilo. The conspiracy was gaining momentum, and the people were starting to side with Absalom. Then a messenger came to David and reported, "The men of Israel are loyal to Absalom." So David said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come on, let's escape. Otherwise no one will be delivered from Absalom. Go immediately, or else he will quickly overtake us and bring disaster on us and kill the city's residents with the sword." The king's servants replied to the king, "We will do whatever our lord the king decides." So the king and all the members of his royal court set out on foot, though the king left behind 10 concubines to attend to the palace. The king and all the people set out on foot, pausing at a spot some distance away. All his servants were leaving with him, along with all the Kerethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, some 600 men who had come on foot from Gath. They were leaving with the king. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why should you come with us? Go back and stay with the new king, for you are a foreigner and an exile from your own country. It seems like you arrived just yesterday. Today, should I make you wander around by going with us? I go where I must go. But as for you, go back and take your men with you. May genuine loyal love protect you." But Ittai replied to the king, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king is, whether dead or alive, there I will be as well." So David said to Ittai, "Come along then." So Ittai the Gittite went along, accompanied by all his men and all the dependents who were with him. So, after Amnon had raped his half-sister Tamar, and Absalom then kills Amnon for it, Absalom is banished from the land, but David longs to see Absalom again. And so Joab forms this plot, essentially, to get Absalom back into Jerusalem. And by putting these words into the mouth of this woman who brings her case before David. And it works. David brings Absalom back, and but he doesn't see the king's face. And then Absalom burns Joab's field, and he's back with the king again. But after that, he grows in power and authority, and the men of Israel start to become loyal to Absalom because he waits outside of the city gate and says to anybody who's seeking justice, "Oh, all the judges are busy up at the palace, but if only somebody would make me king, then I would really bring justice for Israel." So, in that way, he brought about people's loyalties to him, and eventually establishes this plot to get him the throne, and David and all of his people have to evacuate the palace except for 10 concubines, which he leaves behind. So, yeah, just reading a bit of Guzik here. The king kissed Absalom at the end of chapter 14. David offered Absalom forgiveness without any repentance or resolution of the wrong. In personal relationships, it is often a sign of love and graciousness to overlook a wrong. Proverbs 10:12 says, "Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers over all sins." But as king of Israel, this was more than a personal matter with David. He was the chief judge of Israel, and David excused and overlooked Absalom's obvious crimes. He should have kicked him, rather, and not have hardened him to further villainy, says Trapp. David's forgiveness of Absalom was completely inadequate, leading to a further outbreak of sin. God's forgiveness of a man's soul is completely adequate, and a great deterrent to continued sin. Yeah. Here he was letting a murderer off with no further punishment. With no punishment, essentially, other than the banishment for the 2 years. Let me see here. Yeah, Absalom got a chariot and horses, and had 50 men run in front of him. This means that Absalom did not want the chariot for speed, but to make an impressive procession. This was Absalom the politician, sensing what the people wanted and knowing how to give them the image of it. From what we know of Absalom, we can guess that he really didn't consider himself a man of the people at all. He regularly acted as if he was above others, and the law that applied to others didn't apply to him. He knew he was better looking, better connected, better off, and had better political instincts than most anyone. But these political instincts made Absalom know that he had to create the image of a man of the people. Oh, also, Absalom makes this false pretense to go down to Hebron, that if he would be allowed back from Geshur, that he would serve the Lord. Absalom committed treason under the guise of worship. He knew that the appearance of spirituality could work in his favor. It is possible, perhaps likely, that Absalom did all this feeling spiritually and in God's will. Men in Absalom's place often deceive themselves with words like this: "Lord, you know we need new leadership. Thank you for raising me up for such a time as this. Guide me and bless me, Lord, as I endeavor to do what is best for your people." Divisive people almost never see themselves as divisive. They see themselves as crusaders for God's righteous cause, and often believe or hope God's hand is upon them. This is especially a problem when many will only believe a person is divisive if they were to admit they are divisive. Yeah, carrying on here. John chapter 18, verses 1 through 24. When Jesus had said these things, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley. There was an orchard there, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, the one who betrayed him, knew the place too, because Jesus had met there many times with his disciples. So Judas obtained a squad of soldiers and some officers of the chief priests and Pharisees. They came to the orchard with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, because he knew everything that was going to happen to him, came and asked them, "Who are you looking for?" They replied, "Jesus the Nazarene." He told them, "I am he." Now Judas, the one who betrayed him, was standing there with them. So when Jesus said to them, "I am he," they retreated and fell to the ground. Then Jesus asked them again, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus replied, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, let these men go." He said this to fulfill the words he had spoken. "I have not lost a single one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, pulled it out and struck the high priest's slave, cutting off his right ear. Now the slave's name was Malchus. But Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me?" Then the squad of soldiers, with their commanding officer and the officers of the Jewish leaders, arrested Jesus and tied him up. They brought him first to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who had advised the Jewish leaders that it was to their advantage that one man die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed them as they brought Jesus to Annas. Now the other disciple was acquainted with the high priest, and he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Simon Peter was left standing outside by the door. So the other disciple, who was acquainted with the high priest, came out and spoke to the slave girl, who watched the door, and brought Peter inside. The girl who was the doorkeeper said to Peter, "You're not one of this man's disciples too, are you?" He replied, "I am not." Now the slaves and the guards were standing around a charcoal fire they had made, warming themselves because it was cold. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. While this was happening, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus replied, "I have spoken publicly to the world. I always taught in the synagogues and in the temple courts, where all the Jewish people assemble together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said. They know what I said." When Jesus had said this, one of the high priest's officers who stood nearby struck him on the face and said, "Is that the way you answer the high priest?" Jesus replied, "If I have said something wrong, confirm what is wrong. But if I spoke correctly, why strike me?" Then Annas sent him, still tied up, to Caiaphas, the high priest. Yeah. Annas offers no judgment and ties him up and, still has him tied up, and pushes him off to Caiaphas. So it would seem that Annas really couldn't find anything wrong with him and just hit him for no reason. So, not exactly justice here. Yeah. And I think as Jesus is confronted in the Garden of Gethsemane here, you have these guards approaching him, and on asking, "Who are you looking for?" they say, "Jesus the Nazarene," and he says, "I am he." I don't know that it actually has the he in there. No, it's just ego me. So at that particular revelation, they fall back. Again, that's the covenant name that the Lord gave to Moses back in the Old Testament. That is, I am. So, all of this, I think, is to emphasize that Jesus went willingly with them and that he was not accosted outside of his will. So, carrying on, Psalm 119, verses 97 through 112. Mem. Oh, how I love your law. All day long I meditate on it. Your commandments make me wiser than my enemies, for I am always aware of them. I have more insights than all my teachers, for I meditate on your rules. I am more discerning than those older than I, for I observe your precepts. I stay away from the evil paths, so that I may keep your instructions. I do not turn aside from your regulations, for you teach me. Your words are sweeter in my mouth than honey. Your precepts give me discernment. Therefore I hate all deceitful actions. Noon. Your word is a lamp to walk by, and a light to illuminate my path. I have vowed and solemnly sworn to keep your just regulations. I am suffering terribly, O Lord. Revive me with your word. O Lord, please accept the free will offerings of my praise. Teach me regulations. My life is in continual danger, but I do not forget your law. The wicked lay a trap for me, but I do not wander from your precepts. I claim your rules as my permanent possession, for they give me joy. I am determined to obey your statutes at all times, to the very end. And finally, Proverbs 16, verses 8 and 9. Better to have a little with righteousness than to have abundant income without justice. A person plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day.